Hello and welcome back to the Better Everyday podcast. Darren?
John?
Our Starbucks cups.
And it's freezing cold here, so
we got
the fireplace in our back.
So I always think when I meet you in Bloomington in January, man, you're dedicated to Better Every Day because you have a place where it's 71 degrees. You don't have to record this way.
Yeah, I'm playing a tennis tournament, starts Friday.
Yeah.
So coming up really quickly, so I'll head back down. I'm not going to sacrifice that.
Yeah. Just one day at a time at this point. So I'm excited about a new year for Better Every Day.
I feel like we have more ideas, things we're working on, opportunities in 2025 than we've ever had.
You know, this is a different direction, but you know, we just did this book review for Falling Upward.
Yep.
And Richard Rohr. And because I was studying so much and working through that for the podcast, you know, Google sends me all of this stuff about the two phases of life.
Yep.
And one of the other phases of life that Rohr doesn't talk about, but another guy does, is that the first half of life, you collect stuff. The second half of life, you shed stuff. And I'm feeling that in my life, that the things that I used to want, I don't want as bad as I used to. And I don't have as many wants, I guess. And the little things that used to not be as big deal to me are now the most important things. And it's creating some clarity for me this year.
I'm probably more in a maintenance mode than I've ever been, and not an acquisition mode. So, you know, I feel content with where I'm at. But now it's maintaining, you know, making sure my yard looks fantastic all the time.
That's one of your favorite things.
Yeah, or, you know, just making sure we have the right supplies on a regular basis. It's more maintenance mode than acquisition mode. And that's different because you do go through that first part of your life. And mine actually ended up lasting longer than I expected. But, you know, where you're in that acquisition or growing or financially growing or stuff growing as opposed to mental growing.
I was, as a segue into our conversation today, I was sitting with my dad recently who's aging, and it's kind of weird. It's really weird. You've been there.
Happens.
And just the things that he can't seem to cognitively do anymore are growing. But it almost feels like the less he can do cognitively around the today, the more his memory of the past becomes clear.
Oh, yeah.
So he's starting to tell these stories again.
Yeah.
Stories that I've heard for, you know, my whole life. And there's never been a better storyteller than my dad. To me, he is the best there ever was. And so he'll start a story with, I might have told you this before.
I might have told you this before.
And the answer is no, you've told me this 20 times, but tell it again.
Yeah.
Because the only thing better than a story is a overtold story, because it gets so rich and it gets maybe embellished, definitely embellished.
Sure.
But the story just gets better as you move forward.
Michelle and I have, I don't know, a person or two in our lives that they love to tell stories at family events that there's no chance in the world
actually happened.
That it actually happened. I mean, none.
And nobody cares.
None.
Yeah.
You know, it's like meeting The Rock, you know, Dwayne Johnson, and these sort of things. And Michelle gets frustrated because they're clearly embellished stories.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just enjoy.
Yes.
I said, that's what makes being around that person so much fun. It's the stories.
I know.
I egg them on, and it, you know,
it makes her mad.
It drives Michelle crazy.
So my dad said something to me last week that I can't get out of my head. He said, I said, you know what, Dad? It seems like the more you tell these stories, and I've heard that story 30 times, the worst part of the story in the moment, you know, one of the stories he was telling was, we went camping. We'd been trying to save our money to go camping. You know, I grew up, they were both school teachers. we went camping and we'd saved all of our money to camp. And we were so excited, and we got there, and the storms came, and we got food poisoning. And he's telling the awful parts of the story.
That's what makes the story funny.
No, it's not just what makes it funny. It's the worst part of the story in the moment is the best part of the story later. And he was and he's describing what it smelled like in the tent because of us getting sick and all of these things. And you're just like, what would this story be without the hardship?
Yeah.
But in the moment, and I've been thinking about it in terms of my own personal story. Like what I'm going through right now that feels like the worst part of the story is probably the best part. It's probably the part that makes me better. It's probably the part that people want to hear about.
Yeah.
And it's the part that people resonate with the most.
Well, I mean, we started out by just talking about stories here.
Yeah.
And stories are so much fun. I mean, we always sort of lean in when somebody starts telling a story. They're so much fun. But, you and I were going through an exercise yesterday regarding Better Every Day and this concept of what story are we telling. So there's all kinds of different ways of using the word story. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I for me, it evolved in business around Donald Miller's story brand, which if you've never read, that probably ought to be on our book review list at some point. The concept of story brand is that you have a story, your business has a story, your customer has a story, their customer has a story, if you're B2B or B2C or whatever it is, and all of those stories converge at some point. And it's your job as a business to be able to pick apart that story and be able to explain it in a way that is compelling to your audience. And to him, that's what marketing is.
Yeah.
It's to be able to see the story, the big picture of the story. One of my favorite parts of this book that he wrote was the way he picks apart, and the chapter is called This Will Ruin Every Movie You've Ever Seen. And what he does is pick apart the best movies in our lives, Star Wars. He picks apart Lord of the Rings. He picks apart Harry Potter. And he says every one of these stories is about a hero with a guide. The hero goes through some serious things in their life. The guide helps them through, and we celebrate together. And he said the problem with most stories that businesses tell is if you don't pick apart your story, if you don't do it intentionally, the story ends up being you're the hero. And nobody wants a story without a guide, because it's the guide that actually creates the impact. So what he said in this book that I think is the most powerful part of it is you are the guide. You are not the hero. Stop saying, come to our firm because we're amazing, and start saying, you're amazing. Let us help you get better. You're the hero. We'll be your guide. And that was a pivotal moment to me and how I began to tell stories of my own business and the businesses we work with.
As I think about stories, I mean, if you'd suggested the word story to me a few years back, I would have thought about things exactly like you were talking about with your dad.
Yeah.
Telling a story that happened.
Yeah, a narrative.
At some point, yeah. And that's how I thought about the concept of story. And then, as I got older, you started hearing the concept of story as from a human perspective. Like each of us have a story.
Yeah.
Right? It's our life, being told.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting that people say, yeah, tell me your story. So then we think about the concept of a story as in with our business, like you were talking about with Donald Miller and Story Brand. And, yesterday, you and I are sitting there workshopping, and, we're thinking about what is the story that we want people to hear about this? I mean, what are we going to guide people to? What is this all about? So, when we say the word story, it has all kinds of different connotations for me.
It does. And, where we were headed yesterday and why we kept using that word as we were talking about Better Every Day is this conversation around we need clarity for everybody. We need to figure out where we fit into the story of our customers, and they need to understand how they could use us to better their story.
Yeah.
And to me, story begins with, first of all, when it comes to your business, who's the hero?
Yeah.
It's not you. Hint. And that's the hardest switch for some people because they want to talk about how great their business is and how they're separating themselves from the rest of their competitors. Your customer doesn't care. They're tired of that message. What they want to know, I think Home Depot has this the best. Their story is, and it goes all the way down to their tagline. Their tagline is, "You can do it, we can help." To me, every company that's listening to this podcast right now should have some variation of that tagline as a part of their story. You can do it. It's not that you have to have us or you're lost. It's you can do this. We're here to guide you, to help you, to facilitate, to make it easier, to make it better, whatever that part of it.
Which is, I think, where we came to yesterday.
It is, yeah.
You know, that firm is the hero to all their businesses, but we can help them
Absolutely.
get there. We can guide them on that path.
And your brain just, it gravitates to stories where you're involved. So my dad's telling the story about camping. And the reason I care so much about this story, it's more than just it's funny. It's like, and you were 6 years old at the time, John. Do you remember? Like, I have these vague memories of you and Mom arguing and then you jamming the entire tent in the back with it storming, with it all the stuff in it and everything in the back of our, station wagon. And I'm a part of the story. And where we miss this in business, and maybe where you're missing your storytelling at the next dinner party you have, is it needs to involve the people.
Yeah.
You guys have been camping. You know what it feels like when you guys have this. And when we tell a story that's all about us, it might be funny, it might be interesting, but eventually you lose the interest of the audience. So as soon as you can, you get the audience involved. You're the hero. This is your story. This isn't our story just by ourselves. This is your story. We'll come alongside. That's where the power comes.
As I think about our listeners out there today, and just the power of being able to articulate your business story. Mm-hmm. Just imagine how much easier it is for your sales team or your marketing team or your customers to understand if you're telling a story that makes sense, that turns that customer into a hero. Yeah. When you can get that level of clarity, where we can all tell the same story about the company, about Better Every Day. We want to tell the same story. Then all of a sudden, we can bring other people along on our team because we were telling the same story. And then we can tell that in fun, unique ways and help grow our business. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. So what I've been considering Darren, is that leaders need to have a corporate campfire. I love the phrase campfire because for me growing up, and a lot of people feel this way too, the best stories are told around a campfire. And
that's why you have a campfire outside
your
house.
It is. I still do. I have 3 of them because they're different places. And no matter what happens, no matter who's at my house and what party it is, you come to the end of the night and there are gatherings around that campfire. There's something amazing about a campfire in general, but it's like, it's just enough light that you can see, but dark enough that I can be a little bit vulnerable. I can be emotional. I can tell you things. So I think that what we need in terms of how story relates to our teams is we need a corporate campfire. We need an opportunity. In fact, I've got one of our Better Everyday members actually uses in their Slack channel, they call it the campfire. And it's a place to gather stories. It's a place to say a customer came in yesterday and they said this, and here's how they said that we have related to their story and this. And it's this place to gather the stories. And Darren, there's so many people and so many firms, so many small businesses that are running right past their story because they're living in it and they don't see the interest of it.
I don't think they've ever thought about they're so deep in the weeds.
They're so deep.
And I mean, to me, John, what happens is you have a business and you're solving a problem.
Yeah.
And that problem leads to, let's add this product, or let's add this solution, or let's add this customer profile. And so those things all happen sort of like in the weeds. Mm-hmm. And so you're just adding and doing all this stuff. And you never step back and say, gosh,
what's the story here?
What's the story? What are we doing? I love your line. What would you say
you do
here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly, I think the point of where we're trying to head with this podcast today is to be able to step back. And I know it's been our conversation's been more around narrative story. But inside of your firm right now, there is a customer experience. Some people call it the customer journey.
Yeah.
There's lots of different things to call it. But it is a path from your customer engaging you to you helping your customer get better. And the clearer you can make that story, just like Lord of the Rings, the clearer you can make Frodo and Gandalf's relationship and how they move along, the more I get impacted and the more stickiness you get to, this is a story ongoing. I want to know how it ends. I want to know if I get to be the hero or if I got to go talk to another customer or another vendor. But the stickiness comes from going, we're all telling a story together, and here's how clear it can be. It starts with onboarding, and we'll help you. And then it goes into this moment where we say, you know what, we're just doing your bookkeeping, but we want to be a better guide. And there is this advice we can give you, and here's what that looks like. And if you don't get intentional about that, imagine telling the story of Frodo and Gandalf without a plan, without stepping back and going, what's going to happen next, and how does Frodo move forward?
Right.
It would just be so convoluted, you would lose interest. And that's what's happening to some of your best customers, is that they're losing interest because they can't see the story.
They can't. I think you're spot on. If we don't know the story internally,
Yeah.
and man, I've been around enough companies that can't articulate the story, and everybody in the company is not on the same page to articulate a story,
Yeah.
and that creates confusion and challenges. But when you can't articulate your story at the highest level, it's so hard for your team to get on board and to tell that story, and then customers are just sitting there, thinking like deer in headlights. What? And it just doesn't it never sort of knits together and makes sense.
Absolutely. And if it doesn't knit together and make sense, people won't do the hard work of finding the story in it. And you just become another vendor. You just become another thing in their life.
I've run across a lot of companies where I'm like, what? I mean, what is it you want me to do? Why would I do that? Does that make sense? Or was it just somebody that added another product and tossed it into the mix? So, I mean, I really think this can be powerful for our listeners. Whether you're in financial services or you're running an accounting firm or you're, running a restaurant, whatever it is that you're doing, step back and say, what is the story we're telling here? How are we gonna guide people to success?
And don't forget that the hardship is the point of the story. So when my dad talks about camping, if the camping trip had gone exactly as we planned and it had been awesome, wouldn't have been an interesting story. It was the fact that we all got food poisoning and the fact the storm came and that we jammed the tent in the back and we had to go find a cheap Holiday Inn, and we had all of these things are the hero of the story and the guide of the story facing opposition together. And so the first thing you do when you tell your story as a business is that you go, don't forget, we're not the hero. What hardship is our hero, our customer, our ideal customer going through right now?
Right.
What is it that is most hard in their story? In terms of if you're an accounting firm, in terms of their money, in terms of their bookkeeping, and how can we address that in their story? So that when they come to us, we aren't just saying we do bookkeeping and accounting. We're saying that hard thing that seems like the hardest part of your business, let us take that. Let us help you with that. And Darren, it's that simple at the beginning, that you tell your team, we're not the hero, we're the guide. And by the way, in life, you want to be the guide. That's the most rewarding thing to be. You'll be a hero because you're the guide. Gandalf is my favorite character in the story. Obi-Wan Kenobi becomes the hero, and even though he's not that at the beginning, but finding that hardship is the point of the story. And so much of the power gets removed from a story if you remove the hardship. If you just say, we're great, come to us for your bookkeeping.
For us at Better Every Day, John, we help a lot of accounting firms, along with doing our podcast for everybody. But one of the things we do is we help accounting firms. And we know accounting firms really struggle with sort of navigating where they think the best next moves are.
Yeah.
or where the world is going, whether it's AI or technology or business processes, whatever those things are. And so one of the things we do is sort of help inform them of where we think this is going.
Yeah.
But another thing that we knew and know that they struggle with is strategic planning.
Yeah.
Right? What is the best next thing to do? How do you get your team on that page?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we've developed the opportunity to help firms do their firm retreats each year and create that plan. And then the other thing we know they struggle with is they stay inside their four walls oftentimes, and they just need somebody else to talk to or a community of people to be with and share ideas with. And so as we step back and we look at our story, this is how we developed it.
Yeah.
Here's our core skill sets of helping you see where firms are going, helping you strategically plan that, and then being a guide along the way.
You can do it. We can help. I mean, I really think that is the idea of a corporate story, is letting someone know that you're beside them, that it's not that somehow you have this grandiose idea that without them they couldn't make it.
Yeah.
I think that's a flawed way to look at your messaging. It's that we want to help you in your story. And by the way, we have our story so clear, you'll see yourself in it.
Yeah.
And you'll see yourself getting better because you're a part of the story. And that's hard work. If you're not intentional about it, one of two things will happen. The story will either get so confusing that people lose interest and you'll lose the narrative, or you stop telling stories and you just start preaching.
Yeah.
And as a former preacher, a sermon is nothing without stories. And it becomes the actual thing that keeps people sticking to who you are, what you do, and why they should be paying attention.
So I think what we're asking our listeners to do is just think about what's your firm, what's your company's, what's the story that you're telling? Yeah. And if it doesn't make sense even to you,
it needs to start there.
I would start there.
Yeah. I think about the power of this for your team. We know we are in a period of time where work and life, the relationship between work and life is changing drastically.
Yeah.
And people don't want two stories. They don't want the story that is, this is my home life, and then the story of, then I stop my life and go make money so that I can live on the weekends. That they're not as comfortable with that narrative as your generation and my generation.
Yeah.
And so in order to help them see, hey, we can be a part of your personal story here at work. And it's not necessarily an anomaly from the rest of your story. I think this is an important part for your own staff and their well-being.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's good stuff. Well, thanks for letting us be a part of your story today, at least while you're on your way to work or on the treadmill or whatever you're doing. Appreciate you listening to Better Every Day. Hope you heard something that moves you forward. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, John.